So ever since Makhachev won the belt, I've been suffering from post-JDM loss depression. Cause the JDM disrespect is at an all-time high, okay? But I feel like there's new winds blowing in the welterweight division, and what I mean by that is Makhachev beating JDM has created a ton of new exciting matchups for Makhachev. So in this video, I've decided to go through some of these potential matchups in order to see how well Islam Makhachev matches up against the rest of the welterweight division. And let's start off with Ian Gary. McGregor versus Habib 2.0, or Soy McGregor I should say, but if Ian Gary gets past the Great Bilal, which I think he will, I think he should be next in line for the belt over Shavkat, even though Shavkat beat him, because Shavkat has just been so incredibly inactive. Like, even though he beat Ian Gary, if Ian Gary beats Bilal, he's gotten himself 2 wins in the meantime, and I think this fight is quite sellable as well, because it's Dagestan versus Ireland part 2 in the UFC at least, and Ian Gary is so annoying on the mic, it could create some bad blood between him and Makhachev. But this is a very interesting fight in my opinion, because we've never really seen Islam Makhachev go up against such a long and rangy striker. The people he's fought have all been around the same height as him or shorter, and this could create problems for Makhachev in the stand-up, because he is a long-range striker himself, and this time he'll be at a pretty significant reach disadvantage. Maybe not in the boxing because Ian Gary has T-Rex arms, but with the kicks, which is Ian Gary's best weapon in my opinion. And I could honestly see Ian Gary out tit-for-tatting Makhachev on the feet, throwing teeps, oblique kicks, and maybe even catching Makhachev with a head kick or two. Now that said, I still think Makhachev could have some success in the striking based on the threat of the takedown, and Ian Gary is sometimes lacking a bit in his boxing defense, so Makhachev could tag him with counters and stuff, but I think Makhachev's real way to victory in this fight is via the grappling. And don't get me wrong, Ian Gary is a great grappler, but Islam Makhachev is just a different caliber in my opinion. If he gets Ian Gary to the ground, he will be in complete control, and he also has the ability to submit him on the ground as well, and I do believe he will be able to take down Ian Gary, because in my opinion, Makhachev is just an overall more technical grappler than Shavkat. I think he has better timing with his takedowns out in the open, and I think he's better at taking down people up against the fence. And even though Ian Gary was defending well up against the fence against Shavkat wasn't going for the legs, and as soon as he went for the legs, he started taking down Ian Gary immediately. And I see Makhachev doing the same thing, and I could see him timing a takedown off a punch from Ian Gary, maybe catching a kick and turning it into a takedown. So I will just have to go with Islam Makhachev based on the grappling in this fight. But we move on to
Andreas Gustafsson, the greatest marauder in history.
And listen man, this isn't even close. Andreas Gustafsson with Andreas Gustafsson Makhachev just imposed his will on him for 5 rounds straight, a complete demolition job. Andreas Gustafsson doesn't even need to train for this fight. In fact, he barely trains combat sports. All he does is just lift weights in preparations for his fights, and at the end of some of his weightlifting sessions, if you're lucky, you might see him do a couple of sparring rounds. Like, I've never seen this dude hit the pads in my life, so I think he would just strength mog Makhachev and completely destroy him up against the cage for 5 rounds straight. But moving on, we got Carlos Pradas, and at first glance, this seems like a pretty bad matchup for him based on Makhachev's grappling. And don't get me wrong, it is, but like with Ian Gary, he will have quite a big reach advantage, and he also has insane power on the feet, which makes him quite different from Ian Gary, who's basically just a tit-for-tat striker. So it's a lot more dangerous for Makhachev to stand up with Pradas. Now that said, Makhachev isn't a stationary target. He relies a lot on movement, which obviously does make it a little more tricky for Pradas, and Makhachev's also a southpaw like Pradas, which means this isn't going to be an open stance fight, which I honestly think favors Makhachev, because it's not going to be as easy for Pradas to land that left hand. But Pradas does have his leg kicks, which is going to be a super useful weapon against Makhachev, because Makhachev likes to move around a lot, and that makes it hard to check leg kicks, and if he lands that leg kick enough times, he's going to take away some of that movement from Makhachev and turn him into a stationary fighter, which in turn will make it easier for Pradas to find the knockout. Now, if this fight gets to the ground, I do think Pradas is pretty cooked. He does have pretty good takedown defense though, and he also keeps his hands pretty low, which gives him natural underhooks. But if Leon Edwards is able to get you up against the fence and take you down and take your back, Makhachev is definitely getting you to the ground, and he's keeping you there for the entire round. So I would just have to go with Makhachev in this fight as well. But let's move on to Shavkat. And Shavkat, where have you been, bro? You haven't haven't fought in almost a year. But listen, man, this would be a crazy fight. And what makes this fight so interesting is that Shavkat is a marauder slash a smudge grappler, which means he might be able to negate Makhachev's grappling. Although I will just straight away say this, I think Makhachev is more well-rounded as well as more technical in the grappling. And Shavkat is a strong dude, but I think there's a good chance that Makhachev might be slightly stronger. I mean, just look at his back and the way he controlled JDM on the ground. I rate that JDM performance very highly, because if you look back at his prior fights, he is a really good anti-grappler who's really hard to control on the ground. Meanwhile, Shavkat is struggling to control string being Ian Gary, and Ian Gary even took his back in that fight. But the real way to victory for Shavkat in this fight is to turn it into a scrap on the feet. He has the power advantage and a chin advantage too, and when you look back at Islam's fight, he does struggle when he isn't able to get the takedowns and his opponents decide to turn it into a scrap on the feet. So if I'm Makhachev going into this fight, the game plan is going to be to stay at kicking range and try to pick away at Shavkat with kicks, like Ian Gary did and had some success with in their fight. And when Shavkat pressures forward with his boxing, I'm going to be looking to time it and shoot for the legs, similar to in the JDM fight. And if Shavkat successfully does get into boxing range, I'm immediately trying to time up with the tie clinch, and it can be kind of hard to get it on taller opponents though, I'm not gonna lie. And Shavkat is a pretty strong dude who's really good in the clinch as well, but grabbing the clinch is a lot less risky than scrapping it out in boxing range with Shavkat, in my opinion. And by that I don't mean that Shavkat is a significantly better boxer than Islam, but it's because of the power difference on the feet. Islam just doesn't have the same level of pop that Shavkat does. But overall, this is a very close fight, but I am slightly leaning Makhachev because I believe he can out-grapple Shavkat. Shavkat does stand pretty tall, which makes it easier for Makhachev to take him down. And Shavkat did get reversed against the cage by Ian Gary multiple times, as well as the fact that he got his back taken by Ian Gary. And I understand that Ian Gary is a good grappler, but Makhachev is just a completely different level. And he's also very slippery on the feet, so it's hard to catch him with your boxing. And I think he's going to play it safe on the feet against Shavkat as well. Now that said, Shavkat could turn it into a scrap on the feet and drag Makhachev into deep waters, so it is a bit of a tricky fight. I think this is actually Makhachev's hardest matchup at welterweight, and I understand that I am fencing a bit here, but I am slightly leaning Makhachev in this fight. But we move on to Michael Morales, and first of all, it would be super funny if this dude beat Makhachev, okay? Now second of all, Michael Morales is huge for welterweight. He's gonna be size-mogging Makhachev out there. He's super athletic and super powerful on the feet too, and he's a really good wrestler as well. Now when it comes to the stand-up, I do favor Morales due to the power advantage, reach advantage, and his pure athleticism. But skill for skill, I think Islam is actually better. However, on the feet, Michael Morales is just eventually gonna catch him. That's just what's gonna happen, dude, okay? But he does stand pretty lead leg heavy, which is gonna open up the leg kicks for Makhachev, although they are gonna have to be to the inside of the leg because Morales is orthodox. But obviously, like most Makhachev fights, it's gonna come down to how his opponents fare in the grappling. And Morales is actually a really good wrestler. I think he's like the Ecuadorian wrestling champion or something. He's obviously really strong as well, which is gonna help him. But Makhachev is obviously all around a better grappler, and Morales would be in trouble if he got taken down. But like with the Shavkat fight, it would be really interesting to see if Makhachev can hold down and maybe find a submission on someone who's that big and strong with good grappling as well. But we have seen Morales get taken down by lesser grapplers, which is not a good sign in my opinion. And I understand he was able to defend takedowns from Brady, but Brady was rocked when he shot those takedowns. So when it comes to this fight, I'm also leaning more Makhachev, but it could get real interesting, I'm not gonna lie, and it would be really funny if Morales won. But we move on to Kamaru Usman, who Makhachev said he wanted to fight if he won the belt, and I understand why, because I think this is the easiest fight for Makhachev. Like in the grappling, it can get competitive. Usman's obviously a really good wrestler, and he showed in the Hamza fight that he's really good at defending on the ground as well. I do think Islam is the better grappler though, but that doesn't even matter because Islam is straight up just a better striker in my opinion. Like Usman is a pretty basic boxer. He just kind of throws straight shots, and don't get me wrong, they're really good. He has a really good jab and a lot of power in his right straight, and he has a pretty long reach for his height. His winging hook sucks though, I'm not gonna lie, but Islam is pretty good defensively. He has nice counters, he fights good off the back foot, and he has pretty good kicks as well. So I can definitely see him just cruising on the outside, spamming kicks on Usman, hitting him with counters. And then there's the fact that Usman only slightly outstruck Chimaev on the feet as well. And Hamza and Islam aren't in the same tier when it comes to striking. Hamza hits hard and he has a good jab, but defensively he's horrible. So I would just have to go with Islam Makhachev in this fight. But we move on to Ilya Topuria and understand that he isn't the welterweight, but this is the fight we all want, okay? And I'ma just say this. It's so funny how Makhachev said he wouldn't fight Topuria at 155 because people were just gonna say he beat another featherweight, but he'll gladly fight a featherweight at welterweight, okay? Very crafty move from Makhachev, I must say, because Ilya Topuria isn't even a big featherweight. The guy's like barely 5'6". And don't get me wrong, he's still my GOAT, but he is also a short king, and I have to be realistic because I am the MMA realist, and at 170, Ilya is just gonna be at a pretty big size disadvantage. The way he's gonna put on isn't gonna be functional either. He's gonna be bloat maxed, and who knows, maybe bloat maxed, heartbroken Topuria is a mythical fighter. Maybe the ladder match skill is gonna be doubled. We don't know. But on top of that, he's gonna be fighting a bigger and stronger Makhachev, and you're also gonna be taking away the drawbacks of the weight cut for Makhachev as well. Like, listen, it's just gonna be an uphill battle for my GOAT Ilya, but at 155, I think it's a really tough fight for Makhachev, and I honestly would favor Ilya. I think he has the power to put his lights out on the feet, and he also has the means to get his punches to the chin of Makhachev, because sometimes Makhachev just backs straight up to the fence, and against the fence is where Topuria is the most dangerous. But the grappling of Makhachev could be tricky, but after Topuria put Oliveira in a crucifix, I got a lot of confidence in the grappling of Topuria. It's just if this fight takes place at welterweight, Makhachev is going to be even stronger, even bigger, to an extent where I believe he would just be able to hold down Ilya and keep him there for 5 rounds. So I do think Makhachev owes it to make it at 155, even though Ilya would have the chance to gain a third belt, because Ilya is 5'6". My GOAT is not a welterweight. Michael Morales fights at welterweight. This isn't Ilya's weight class. Ilya is even a bit small for lightweight, so make that fight at 155. But enough yap for today, guys. Check out my last video. It was my reaction to Makhachev beating JDM. But anyways, thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe for some of the best breakdowns on MMA YouTube. I'm just an Islam Makhachev glazer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also don't forget to share this video to every Makhachev fan you know, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye!